Hey everyone. So, if you're involved in building, well, anything really, you know that feeling, right? You're just drowning in customer feedback? Today, we're going to explore a really powerful idea that can help you cut through all that noise and start making decisions with real, genuine confidence.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Product teams these days are absolutely swimming in feedback. So with all this information coming in, why do so many product decisions still end up failing? It turns out the problem isn't a lack of data. It's something else entirely.
You know, for the longest time, the biggest challenge was just getting your hands on enough data. But our world has completely flipped. Today's problem is the exact opposite. We're facing what the source calls signal saturation. This overwhelming wave of input where every single piece of feedback only gives you a tiny fragment of the whole truth.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with this signal saturation problem. Then we'll see why our usual methods for dealing with it don't really work. And after that, we'll meet the hero of our story, the catalytic customer. We'll dig into why their feedback is so powerful, how it can create real momentum, and what the ultimate goal of all of this really is.
So, signal saturation. It's this constant, nonstop flood of input, right? You've got interviews, you've got surveys, tons of usage data, feedback from the sales team, endless support tickets. It's like having 1,000 puzzle pieces scattered on the table, but no picture on the box to guide you. And when it comes time to make a big decision, it feels almost impossible to know which voice to trust.
So, what do we naturally do with all this noise? Well, our first instinct is just to aggregate it all. Lump it all together and look for the most common patterns. It seems logical, for sure, but this is often where the real problems actually begin.
And here's why. The problem is that aggregation just flattens all the interesting differences. Instead of actually resolving the contradictions you find in the feedback, you just end up, reconciling them. You smooth out all the unique, spiky insights and get pulled toward a safe, comfortable, and kind of boring middle ground.
This whole process creates something called well-documented ambiguity. You end up making decisions that are safe. And yeah, they're easy to defend. After all, you're just following the data, right? But those decisions are almost always weak. They're uninspired. And they almost never create any real breakthrough value.
So if just lumping everything together doesn't work, what's the alternative? We need to find a better filter. And that brings us to the core concept here, the catalytic customer. And I promise, this isn't just another corporate buzzword. It's a completely new way of listening.
So who are these people? Well, they're experienced participants in your product's category. They're not your average everyday users, and they're not some extreme edge case either. These are people who have spent enough time navigating the landscape to know what truly works, they can clearly explain why something is falling short, and, this is key, they actually want to help make it better.
This contrast you see here is so important. We're not talking about average users, we're talking about experienced participants. Their feedback isn't just a reactive, frustrated rant. It's constructive, and it's well-reasoned. And most importantly, their perspective isn't just about what's happening today, it's actually predictive of the future.
Okay, so what is it that makes their feedback so uniquely powerful? Why is listening to them kind of like getting a glimpse into the future?
Well, the distinction is actually simple, but it's really profound. See, most customer input is descriptive. It tells you all about a user's current experience, what is happening. But input from a catalytic customer is predictive. It doesn't just describe what is, it points toward what will matter down the road. And their feedback is predictive for three main reasons. First, they just have a deeper, broader model of the whole category, so they see the bigger picture. Second, they're the ones who've already pushed existing solutions to their absolute breaking point. And third, they frame their criticism constructively, as a clear path toward real improvement.
So, when you start to anchor your big decisions in the feedback of these catalytic customers, something pretty amazing starts to happen inside your organization. You move away from that constant churn of gridlock and into a state of focused, sustained momentum.
Because look, making a decision is really only half the battle. The real challenge is making that decision stick. I think we all know this pain. Too often, decisions are constantly being reopened and redebated, and that just grinds all progress to a halt.
And without this kind of catalytic anchor, you see what happens. Decisions get reopened, work gets hedged because nobody's really sure, and the whole organization just slows down. But with it, decisions actually hold firm. Teams across the board, engineering, marketing, sales, they can all finally execute with real conviction, and the entire organization just starts moving faster. Now, let's be super clear. This is not about ignoring most of your customers. It's really about developing better judgment. The goal isn't just to get more input. It's to gain more clarity about the input you already have. And it's really important to note that this is not a replacement for things like broad market research or digging into your analytics. Instead, think of it as a complementary tool, one that sits right alongside those other methods and makes them all sharper and much more effective. This quote right here just summarizes the whole idea perfectly. The real power of the Catalytic Customer Framework is that it gives you a practical way to develop more useful judgment. It helps you separate the signal from the noise, not based on who's yelling the loudest, but on who is most relevant to the future.
And that brings us to the final and I think the most important question. This is the one I want to leave you with. Instead of just asking, what do our customers want? I want you to start asking this. Who are the people whose problems, if we solve them, will pull the future of our market forward? Who are the catalytic customers for your product?